Good afternoon. I'm Shelley Jones, Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at Missouri State University. The Alumni Association is the organization through which Missouri State University students continue their connection with MSU when they leave the university. The Alumni Association is a non-dues paying organization, and all of our alums are viewed as members. If you are new to our series, Bear Talks alumni webinars are monthly professional development sessions now available in a virtual format. So how the webinar will work today. We can't see or hear you. You'll see the Q&A button down at the bottom. If you have questions throughout the presentation, just go ahead and submit those there. I will tell you though that we have received a lot of pre-submitted questions already. So we will be putting the questions at the end after Nancy's presentation. So unfortunately, due to time limitations, we will not get to every question. So today we are thrilled to have with us best-selling author Nancy Allen. If you have not heard her present before, well, you are in for a real treat. Even after receiving 200 rejections from literary agents across the country, she refused to be discouraged. Not only did she break into the publishing world, she now co-authors with James Patterson, the best-selling author in the world. Well, you are sure to be inspired by her tenacity and perseverance and her never give up attitude. So I present to you my new friend and fellow alum, Nancy Allen.
Well, Shelley, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. My goodness, I'm so flattered. I'd be blushing, but I'm so old that I just have kind of a gray complexion these days. But if I could blush, I would do it. Shelley, I am delighted to be here for the Bear Talks chat. And I guess we're going to talk today a little bit about my career path. And the thing about my career path, it hadn't been a straight line. My career path has been a wavy line, actually. It's had some twists and some turns. Now, it's true, I am a lawyer, and for the past 15 years, I have been a member of the faculty at Missouri State University, and like you friends, I am a proud graduate of Missouri State University, class of 1978, which seems like yesterday. But now, my primary occupation is I'm an author. I am currently published by two of the big five publishing houses in New York City. I'm published by HarperCollins, that has my Ozarks Mystery Series. With James Patterson, I'm published by Hachette Book Group in the Little Brown imprint. And in the year 2022, I will have a new solo series at Hachette Book Group that will be published by Grand Central Publishing. So the books I write, they are courtroom dramas. They're also called legal thrillers. So they're kind of like the books that John Grisham likes, but better. So much better. A St. Louis reviewer said in his article that my books are like John Grisham meets Dan Woodrell. Oh my God, I like that. Because we all know that Grisham is the king of the legal thriller. And Dan Woodrell, he wrote Winter's Bone. Dan Woodrell is the king of hillbilly noir. So all I want is to be queen. I want to be the queen of the hillbilly noir legal thriller. That's all I ask. Now, my writing career began with a book entitled The Code of the Hills. Code of the Hills is the first book in HarperCollins' Ozarks Mystery Series. And you know my educational background. I did not receive my education on the East or West Coast. I didn't get a Master's of Fine Arts from Harvard, which led to a publishing contract because of my many intimate contacts in the New York publishing world. Now, that isn't how it went for me. I went to SMSU, where I had one creative writing class in 1977. And then After I got my bachelor's of science in education, English and speech, I went to law school at Mizzou, and then I practiced law, and then I taught law at the undergrad level back at Missouri State. But I always wanted to write a book. So about 9 years ago, by golly, I wrote one, and this is it. This is it, the first, The Code of the Hills. Now, one significant way that I differ from James Grisham, aside from being a Missourian, is that my main characters, my protagonists in all of my books, they are always female. James Patterson asked me when we were about to start our second book together, he said, now, if you like, we could have our main character be a man. And I said, oh, I think there are enough books out there about men. So I star women. I always star women, and the star of Code of the Hills is Elsie Arnold. Elsie is a young assistant prosecutor in a fictional county in the Missouri Ozarks. And what HarperCollins liked about Elsie is she's not a perfect protagonist. Elsie is not Superwoman. You know, you don't see nearly as many female heroes as you do men in the thriller and suspense genre, but when you do see women, they tend to be a little one-dimensional, in my opinion. They're always so perfect, perfectly perfect in every way. They're always brilliant, the brilliant FBI agent or the brilliant medical examiner, and they never make mistakes, and they never eat. They never eat food. Maybe a salad. They might pick at a salad, and they're always exercising. Whenever they get really stressed from their really, really stressful job, they will strap on running shoes and run for 10 miles. And my girl Elsie, she's not like that. Elsie is not perfect. She is flawed. She has feet of clay. She cusses like a sailor. It wasn't a stretch for me to include that part, by the way. A lot of personal experience with that. But she cusses like a sailor, and she eats, not salad. She never eats salad. At eating time, Elsie pulls into the Sonic Drive-In where she orders a foot-long coney dog with a side of onion rings. Washes it down with one of those big old Diet Cokes. And when Elsie gets stressed, does she run? Does she run? Yeah, she runs to the nearest bar room where she slams beer like a Missouri State frat boy. And she makes mistakes. Elsie makes mistakes in her personal life and her professional life as well. She makes mistakes that affect the outcome of her case. So she's a mixed bag, but her heart is in the right place. And she is passionately dedicated to seeing justice done in her neck of the woods in the Ozarks. Yeah. In that first book, Code of the Hills, Elsie handles a difficult sex case in which a man is charged with raping his daughters. It explores not only that crime, but it also explores the generational pattern of that kind of abuse. Did I have the background to write that book, Code of the Hills? Yeah. When I graduated from Mizzou Law School, came back to Springfield in the summer of 1981, and I went into the Greene County Prosecutor's Office. And when I joined on there, I was the only woman in the Greene County Prosecutor's Office because I was one of that first handful of attorneys that were the female attorneys who broke into the legal profession in Springfield in the early 1980s. So, since I was the only woman in felony prosecution, they assigned me the sex cases. It's like, oh, here, a woman. Here's the sex cases. So, as a trial attorney, I cut my teeth on incest because it's no secret we have a terrible lot of incest in the Ozarks. Greene County has the highest rate of sex crimes involving children in the state of Missouri. Missouri is one of the top in the nation. This was true in the 1980s, and it's still true today. So while I was handling those terrible, terrible cases. As a young woman in my 20s, I thought, I ought to write a book about this. But I did not pick up a pen until almost 30 years later. Nearly 30 years later, 30 years passed for me to pick up that pen, and this is it. I was told the hills. So I wrote a book, started it as it happens on January 1 of that year, and I finished it at the end of June. A lot of people write a book. A lot of people write a book. I'll tell you, it's easier to start one than it is to finish one. And here's a secret. The hardest part is the middle. But anyway, I had a book, and so I had a dream, right? I wanted to see it between two covers, like people do. And in fact, I was had a preposterous enough dream at that time that not only did I want to see it published, I wanted my book to be published by one of the big 5 New York publishing houses. So I did a little research, and I went to the internet, and I learned that it'd be easy to self-pub. It's easier than it ever has been before to self-pub one of your works. But if I wanted to be traditionally published, I would need a literary agent to submit the book to the publishing houses on my behalf. So I needed a literary agent. I set out to find one. It took 10 months to find my first literary agent. Remember, it only took me 6 months to write the damn book. It took 10 months to find a literary agent who would actually agree to represent me. You send out query letters to get a literary agent, and in that 10-month time period, I sent out so many query letters to literary agents. I lost count of the number of agents that either rejected it or ignored it, but it was well over 200. In fact, I was rejected so many times that an ordinary person might have started to feel discouraged. But all that rejection had the effect of making me insanely determined. I would get an agent, I would find a publisher, and I would, by God, hold that traditionally published book in my hands, walk into a Barnes & Noble and see it on the shelf. So I got that first agent, like I told you, the one that took me 10 months to find. She was New York, young gal, with an okay agency. She kind of liked my book. She said I'd have to do rewrites and revisions. I expected that. I agreed. So we spent a year together, and over the course of that year, she gave me some patchy editorial advice, and I tried to make her happy. And I never heard from her much, but one day I received an email from this woman. She said, Nancy, the vulgar language that your protagonist uses in your book, it's off-putting. It's got to go. And I read that and I thought, I don't think this woman understands my book. And I fired her. I fired her that very day, even though by so doing, I was breaking one of the many, many unwritten rules there are for authors who want to get published, one of which is never, never, never fire your agent. You can never fire your agent because no matter what they do to you or how they treat you, you might never find another. Yeah, I blew that rule out of the list and off the book, and I fired her, fired the first agent, drafted a new query letter, sent it off. I had a new agent in 2 weeks. 2 weeks this time, not 10 months. I had a better agent. In fact, she was with a bigger agency. She had one very, very famous client in the mystery, thriller, and suspense genre, and she was used to making big money deals. So I had a new agent. She said, you're going to have to revise and rewrite. I said, okay, because I was still pretty much doing everything everybody told me to do, pretty much. And so I revised for her over a year. The story of our time together is very dramatic and interesting, but I'd best not go into it. So let me just tell you that after a year, she and I parted ways because I fired that agent because, see, it wasn't working out for me. So, fired that agent. I drafted a new and even better query letter, sent it out, got me a new agent. Took 2 days that time. I had a new agent in 2 days. And I landed with my current agent, Jill Marr. Jill Marr, who is at the Sandra Dykstra Literary Agency in California. The Dykstra Agency, they're the powerhouse agency on the West Coast. So Jill and I revised again. She sent my book out, and it landed on the desk of a lovely, lovely young editor at HarperCollins. That young woman's name is Trish Daly. And Trish loved Elsie. She loved my girl Elsie. She loved the story. She loved the Ozarks. She liked my voice. And so finally, I got an offer for a legal thriller series with HarperCollins, one of the big 5 New York publishing houses. I did it. And I did it because I refused to be discouraged. So I had a series. They published Code of the Hills, but I had to write a second book, had to write a sequel, so I did. And the second book in the series of the Elsie books is A Killing of the Creek. And in that sequel, Elsie gets her first murder case. And Elsie wants a murder case, not because she wants anyone to have to die, but if you're a prosecutor, being assigned a murder case, well, it's kind of like a badge of honor for a prosecutor because it's a demonstration that that individual has competence and skill. So Elsie is assigned her first murder case, but it happens that the criminal defendant in that case is 15 years old. A 15-year-old boy who was being charged with murder for slitting a woman's throat and dumping her body in the creek. So Elsie got a murder case, but I'm going to tell you that's not a murder case anyone would want because nobody wants to have to prosecute for murder a juvenile who has been certified to stand trial as an adult. So, did I have the chops to write that particular book? Yes. My first solo murder trial in Greene County, Missouri. I tried and convicted a 16-year-old for the crime of murder in the first degree. It wasn't even supposed to be my case, but it was such a hot potato that nobody in the office wanted it. And so I wasn't even that high up in the stepladder of the office, but they tossed it on my desk 10 days before trial and said, "Here, Nancy, you're trying this murder case. It'll be a real feather in your cap." So I went to trial, and I tried and convicted the young man. Here's an interesting side note. As it happens, fun fact, that murder trial was covered by a real live True Detective magazine. Now, I don't know how many of you still have your copy of the 1983 issue of Front Page Detective, but I do. Here it is. Now, I would like to point out an important fact at this juncture. This is not my picture on the cover. It's not me. This is some young woman in a distressing situation. I do not know her. So that's not me. I did make a picture on the inside of the magazine, but I'm fully clothed, standing in front of the old Greene County Courthouse, 26 years old, and trying to look really tough. So after Killing at the Creek, HarperCollins renewed the contract. They wanted more. I wrote 2 more Elsie books. Number 3, The Wages of Sin. Number 3, it's a death penalty case for Elsie, and it is inspired by some actual cases in Springfield, Missouri, where domestic violence ends in murder. So that was The Wages of Sin. Number 4, the last book in the series so far, is Wolf in the Woods. And in A Wolf in the Woods, published in 2018, it deals with sex trafficking. And, you know, I wanted to address that because a lot of people in Missouri and in the heartland, in our part of the country, they think that sex trafficking is just something that happens on the East Coast or the West Coast or maybe in other countries. but it is in the heartland too. It's here. The Western District of Missouri, and you know, Springfield is in the Western District of the U.S. Attorney's Office. The U.S. Attorney's Office of the Western District of Missouri, they file more sex trafficking cases than almost any other part of the country because it is here. We have this social problem as well. Our children and teenagers are vulnerable to this insidious crime. In particular, the internet has given criminals a pathway to our young people, and so the book explores that. So, right after I turned in book number 3 to HarperCollins, and my editor, Trish, remember the lovely young woman who brought me on board at HarperCollins. I turned in Wages of Sin, and we edited that, and then Trish called me on the phone one day, and she said, Nancy, I am leaving HarperCollins. I said, no, don't go. I loved Trish. I adored her. She was the one who opened the door to me at HarperCollins. She got my books between 2 covers. She was the one who enabled me to get put under the Iron Curtain of New York City publishing. So I was distraught. I was torn apart until 2 weeks later, when I got another phone call from Trish Daly. She called me again and said, Nancy, I'm at my new job. I am now in the James Patterson division of Little Brown, which is in the Hachette book group. And Nancy, Mr. Patterson would like to write a book with you if you're interested in working with him. And I said, yes, because James Patterson is king. James Patterson is the best-selling author in the world. He sells more books than anybody. He sells more books than Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, or Lee Child. And he sells more books, by the way, than John Grisham. And there is an entire division of Little Brown devoted to James Patterson alone, because Patterson is singly, individually responsible for 1/3 of the publishing house's overall sales every year. So I said he's king. At Hachette Book Group, James Patterson is God. So when Trish came on board with the James Patterson division, they had a meeting and Patterson was there, and he said, I want to do a legal thriller. I want to set it in the South. Have a female main character. Does anybody have any idea of somebody I might work with? And Trish went, and the rest is history. Hello, juror number 3. Okay, I acknowledge his name is in much bigger letters than mine, but look, there it is. There it is, you know, the favorite page of this book that I have. And this is the page when I autograph that I always sign, because as you can see, the title page is the page where his name and my name are exactly the same size. So, Patterson and I, we worked on juror number 3 for a long time. And then once it was complete, we've been through edits with Little Brown, it was ready to go. Little Brown kept bumping the release date of juror number 3 because that was the year everything had to work around the release of The President is Missing, which you may know was the book that James Patterson co-authored with President Clinton. But finally the day came, and juror number 3 was released on September 10 of 2018. And then it hit number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list, which actually had hit number 1 on 2 New York Times bestseller lists, hardcover fiction and print and e-fiction. And then some interesting things started happening. For example, I got a call from the publisher. The publisher called me on the phone and told me that juror number 3 was the surprise hit for Little Brown for the year 2018. Then I got a fan letter from Bill Clinton. Apparently, he really enjoyed it, although it was a little difficult to tell because the fan letter was handwritten and he has very, very difficult handwriting to be able to read. And then Seth Meyers. Seth Meyers talked about the book on late night. Seth Meyers talked about juror number 3 on late night. And when he did, Seth Meyers said my name 2 times, Seth Meyers, late night. And then, so one day, I was home. I was in my bathroom. You're thinking, why do you need to tell us this story and say you were in the bathroom? But I'm just telling you like it happened. I was. So I was home and I was in the bathroom and the telephone rang and my son was there and he said, Mom, James Patterson's calling you on the landline. And I said, he is not. Stop that. But he was. He was. No one but spammers and scammers had called on that landline for, we're the last people in America to have a landline, but by God, James Patterson called on the landline that day. And he called because he wanted to ask if I wanted to write another book with him. So Jim and I, by the way, I get to call him Jim now instead of Mr. Patterson, like back in the old juror number 3 days. So Jim and I, we wrote our second book together in the year 2019. We are just now completing our third book together as we speak. I've been working with and doing that, except that I'm sitting here today at the Alumni Center. And Jim tells me that those books are both going to be released this summer 2021. He said it is going to be a summer blockbuster, and blockbuster is my new favorite word. So it seems like a long time ago that I was a woman with nothing but a dream and a manuscript who had 200 rejections from all those literary agents in New York City who would kill to represent me now. So let me stop and have a sip of this diet soda. So I am working with the biggest author in the world. We hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Hachette Book Group through Grand Central wants me to do a new series solo. I still got Elsie over at HarperCollins. When I go to Barnes & Noble, I guarantee you, I promise you, my book's on the shelf. So who could ask for anything more? Me. You know what I want. I want Hollywood. I want Hollywood. I want a TV series. So I told you my literary agent is the Big House in Southern California. So after Code of the Hills and Killing of the Creek came out, they told me that their Hollywood guy, my literary manager in Hollywood, they said that he was out pitching around town. And I was ecstatic. So I never met this guy. I never talked to him, but I got in touch with him and I told my literary manager in Hollywood, I said, I want you to tell me everything that's going on. And he told me nothing. In fact, not only did I get no information, I got a 1-sentence response, which read, I'll be in touch when there's news, which translates as, don't call us, we'll call you. Yeah, that didn't work for me. That didn't work for me. There are many, many unwritten rules if you are an author. Many unwritten rules, as I have touched on before, and a lot of them, some are about pitching your work. You gotta be hands-off, writer. Be hands-off. Never bother your reps. Don't get pissed. Never bother them. You must sit and wait and do as you're told. Many, many, many rules. But that didn't work for me. And so one day I thought, I know how to send an email. I'm good at it because I've got a whole lot of experience. And I truly and genuinely believe nobody can pitch my book or my experience or any of my writing. Nobody can pitch it better than I can. So I wrote an email. I wrote an email about Code of the Hills and what a swell television series it would make. And I'm going to tell you, it was a hell of an email. It was a good email. And so I wrote it, and then I thought, okay, this is a fine email I have written. Where should I send it? It's 2015, and I thought, well, I like Game of Thrones. So I sent that email to the president of HBO. Now you're thinking, Nancy Allen, you didn't have that guy's contact information. Well, of course I didn't have his personal contact information, but come on, how hard can it be? First name dot last name at HBO.com. First initial, last name at HBO.com. I tried several different combinations, and by God, one of them worked. It reached him because 20 minutes after I sent an email, I received an email back from David Levine. David Levine is the head of drama for HBO. In fact, he was in charge of Game of Thrones. So Levine got in touch with me, and he said, the president just sent me your email, and I'd like to read your books. Eureka! It worked. So HBO was reading my books, so everybody wanted to read Code of the Hills. So my literary manager in Hollywood got real motivated at that point. And not long after that, my husband Randy and I, we got on an airplane and flew to Hollywood because we had a series of meetings set up with HBO and other studios and production companies. And I got off the plane at LAX, and I realized as I looked around, I have landed on the planet Mars. I'm going to tell you, and you won't disbelieve this, I was the oldest and fattest woman in all of Los Angeles County. But despite that, the meetings went great. Went great. In fact, on that particular moment of time in Hollywood, they thought that it was interesting that I had gray in my hair, that I didn't lie about my age, that I made a funny joke or two about my girth, and that I had this swell dialect that I inherited from my mother in the region of the state of Missouri in which I lived. And they went, oh my God, she's so authentic. And so by the time I got back and landed back at the Springfield Branson, not regional airport, it's national airport, so sorry, Springfield. National airport, by God, I turned on my phone and we had a deal. My dramatic rights had been optioned and I had a TV deal. It wasn't HBO, but it was another major studio. And I thought, that was easy. But my agent, when I signed the contract, she said, Nancy, don't buy your dress yet. And I said, what does that mean? I don't understand what that means. And she said, your dress for the premiere, don't buy it yet. You see, Hollywood is a fickle pickle. And three things happened that year. During that 1 year option. The vice president at the studio that I had pitched to and who was my cheerleader, he loved Code of the Hills. He loved Elsie. He left. He left the studio, and his replacement was a Stephen King fan. And also, over the course of that year, Netflix made a big announcement in Variety that they had a hot new series coming out in the fall, a show called Ozark. So, my champion was gone. Jason Bateman beat us to the punch, and the studio made Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes into a series, and they let Code of the Hills die on the vine. And friends, that's showbiz. Well, since then, I have been under contract for dramatic rights deals 2 more times. I'm under one right now, but I haven't bought a dress yet, as it happens, because even though I currently have a book to film enterprise with a production company for a new series, I'm very, very excited, but I haven't bought the dress because when it comes to TV and film, I have learned that I must keep in mind the words of the late, great Doris Day. Que sera, sera. But it's been a very valuable experience, especially when we went to Hollywood and I pitched my work and I got props for being authentic. And I'm going to tell you, I don't care what your enterprise or business is, authenticity is key in any enterprise. And whatever your background is, doesn't matter what it is, you use it to your own personal advantage. I got another story for you. So I was invited, this couple of years ago, I was invited to speak at a big mystery writers event in New York City. And so I was on a panel of legal thriller writers. There were 6 or 7 of us. I was the only female, only woman on the panel, and they placed me at the end of this long table of the writers. And so then the moderator started out, and the moderator asked us to introduce ourselves and give the audience a little background. And so, first guy, he introduced himself and said, I am a graduate of Harvard Law School. Next guy, I did my undergrad at Princeton and then graduated from Yale Law. Guy next to him, undergrad Yale Law. And I'm sitting there thinking, because they're coming down to me, right? And I'm thinking, this is like a scene in a movie. This is like something that was scripted. Every one of those men at that table, they were Ivy League, and they were spinning off their pedigree like it was solid gold. By the time they got to me, and remember, they stuck me at the end, I'm last, right? I knew exactly what to do. I took a deep breath and I stood and I said, I'm Nancy Allen and I am the product of public education. Mizzou Law School, undergrad, Missouri State University, go Bears! The crowd went wild. It brought down the house because I owned it. I owned it and I took pride in it. And that was not made up. Ladies and gentlemen, that is true. I am proud of being a Southwest Missouri Ozarks native. I am proud of Missouri State University, proud of the years I spent here as a student, and terrifically proud of the 15 years I contributed to the education of others. Oh, I'm proud of Mizzou too. That's swell. But you know, I really think your undergrad experience is where your heart is always closest. So, but back to the story, I think you gotta be who you are and don't apologize for your roots. Never, never, never. And I suppose if I had gone to Harvard and graduated from Harvard, there might be certain advantages to that, I guess. But see, I didn't. I am a Springfield girl who graduated from my hometown college, SMSU, in 1978. So take that Southwest Missouri, salt of the earth, hillbilly identity, and just ride it up to the top of the hill. I really believe you gotta be true to yourself and mind the advantages that are innate to your personal experience. Now, my story has a happy ending. I am really, really satisfied with the way that my personal career path has played out, with all its twists and turns. Practice of law was great. I loved those years in the classroom at Missouri State University. And this author gig, it's really working out real well. But I would tell anyone who has a dream or a goal in mind that may seem improbable, I made it happen. But a couple of words of advice, free advice, worth exactly what you're paying for. Okay, here's a few words of advice. Number one, you really have to believe in it. And number two, you gotta work at the impossible dream like crazy. Work at it like crazy, even when it's not profitable in the early stages. Number three, and I just beat this drum, authenticity. Use your innate advantages. What do you possess that gives you the edge? If you're writing a book, why is that the book that no one but you can write? Number four, when the conventional rules are not working for you, you have to be prepared to depart from it. Now, when I say departing from rules, I'm not talking about the law. Everyone, you must follow the law. I am not a scofflaw. I'm talking about these unwritten rules, things that just aren't done. Sometimes you got to do those things. Actually, I've known that for 64 years. Sometimes you got to email the president of each HBO, even though anyone would tell you that's crazy. And number five, you got to be a little bit crazy, going back to crazy. You have to be so insane that you won't give up when any normal person would throw in the towel. All righty. Now, Shelley, I think you said we might have some questions.
Yes, we do have some questions and we are excited to start asking those. So, alrighty, first one, are any of the events in the books based on real events, like how Law and Order SVU is inspired by actual crimes?
Well, the first thing I must make clear, perfectly clear, all my books, they are fiction. They are fiction. All characters are imaginary. Any resemblance to any individual or event is mere circumstances. And really, they're true. They're made up. But because you write legal thrillers, if you're a lawyer, you're able to draw on courtroom experience when you write a courtroom scene. And when I wrote as a prosecutor, you're able to draw on the experience of a prosecutor to be able to write courtroom scenes and prosecutorial experiences realistically. That being said, every book has to come from a kernel of inspiration, right? Now, I don't write true crime, not interested in it. And I think SVU is kind of like thinly veiled true crime. They'll take a true crime story and change some names and slap a new name on it and put it out as a television show. I guess they do that. I have no idea. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, Law and Order SVU. But my stories are imaginary. My characters are always created from my imagination, but there's always a kernel of inspiration. And since I write legal thrillers and courtroom dramas, always about criminal cases, sometimes I will read about something that happens in Missouri. And I don't turn around and write a book about it. That's not what I do. But sometimes it will store a kernel in my idea. It's like a seed. And the seed germinates. And it's not what happened, but it was like, what if something happened to a particular person? What if there was an offshoot that involved something else? What if one of my main characters played into it in the following fashion? And so sometimes that germinating seed will create from just a little blurb that I read in a newspaper, something that happened in Missouri, and it will become a fictional story. So I'm not Law and Order SVU, but every story has to come from someplace. And what the imagination can do with a little tiny piece of reality is create something absolutely new that is an original story.
All righty. So another question that was pre-submitted, what is your writing method? In other words, how do you go from your initial idea to the finished product, and how long does that take?
First of all, one thing that is a little unusual about me, and it's just because I am so old. I handwrite my work. I handwrite it on legal pads because I like to, well, first of all, because I'm so old that I'm used to writing. Second of all, because when my father told me to take typing in high school, I didn't because I didn't think I would enjoy it. So anyway, I handwrite my manuscripts and I handwrite my chapters. And then I use Office Dictate to dictate them in because I have such a twang. Sometimes it comes out in, very, very strange language. But as far as the kind of writer I am, that's kind of interesting. In fiction, with novelists, there are two kinds of writers. You're either an outliner or you're a pantser. Now, what a pantser, also called an organic writer. They write by the seat of their pants. That's why you call them a pantser, which means they have an idea for a story and they pick up a pen or sit down at the keyboard and they just start. Chapter 1 and the story takes them. And when I wrote the Elsie books, I was a pantser. I've got an idea. I can see chapter 1 in my head. I'd sit down and the pen would flow. Anyone who knows anything about James Patterson knows he is an outliner. He is not a pantser. If you're an outliner, you don't pick up your pen or sit down at the keyboard and start chapter 1 in the beginning. Once upon a time. No, an outliner will sit down and make an outline of the entire novel, chapter by chapter. And you complete that outline before you ever pick up a pen and write chapter 1. There are advantages to both sides. If you are a pantser, organic, and you just get to go and let the story take you, it's so much easier to start a book, so much easier and more fun to start your book if you're a pantser and you get to have the romance of the story taking you along. However, if you are an outliner, it's a lot harder to start your book. It's a lot easier to finish the book because problem with being a pantser and your book is carrying you along, you will run into the curse of what is known as writer's block. There is every chance that you're going to hit a point in that novel where you're going to go, what happens, man? I got nothing. I got no clue. I cannot say. I no longer see it in my head. That's really, really, really scary, especially when you're working under a deadline. But if you're an outliner, that never happens to you. Why? You don't know what happens next? Look at the damn outline. It'll tell you. So it's also been said by people other than me, so I'm stealing this line, working with James Patterson is kind of like having a master's class in writing. And the first thing he taught me is that we prepare an outline before we ever start chapter 1 because we're outliners and it's hard. It's hard to be an outliner, but boy, does it pay off because if you're an outliner, you always are assured that you're going to get to write the two most beautiful words in your manuscript, which are the end.
That's great. All right, we have a question that's come from our audience. Has writing novels set in the Ozarks changed your sense of this region?
That's such an interesting question because I already knew the region really, really, really well. I was born in 1956 at St. John's Hospital, even though we lived in Lawrence County in Mount Vernon, but there wasn't a hospital in Lawrence County except for the tuberculosis hospital. So I was born in Springfield, lived in Lawrence County, small town county seat, until I was about to go into second grade. Then I moved to Springfield, and I have lived in Springfield for all the rest of my life, except for the time I spent in Columbia, Missouri in law school. So I didn't need to learn about the Ozarks because I know it just about as well as 64 years can tell it to you. One thing that I think opened my eyes to a different side of the Ozarks. So I was a Springfield girl, right? I went to Pershing Elementary, Pershing Junior High, Glendale High School, lived in Southern Hills, went to SMS, lived close to campus. and I thought I knew Springfield real well. When I came back from law school and I went into the prosecutor's office and I saw a side of Greene County, Missouri, and of the Ozarks that I'd never seen before. When you work in prosecution and all of a sudden you are seeing those criminal cases up close through a micro, I was going to say a microscope. I really like to say, what is that, Sherlock Holmes, through a magnifying glass. Thank you. Aphasia. Oh, old age. Anyway, it's like I saw the underbelly of the community for the first time, and I saw it really, really, really close up. So the years in prosecution, even though more so than the years that I spent in the Attorney General's office, I saw a side of Springfield that I didn't know existed. And so because of the prosecutorial experience, I write books that include characters that I am portraying as Ozarkians who were people that a lot of people in Springfield don't know existed.
Okay. The next question, do you have recommendations for becoming a stronger, more detailed writer?
One thing about it, to be a stronger writer, and this is more about my personal method. Okay, you're going to write your first draft. Everybody's going to write their first draft. And then it's not done. You have just begun. So you write the first draft. Now with me, remember, I got to get it into my computer at that point. And so that's usually my first rewrite when I get it into the computer. And then I revise again. And then one thing that I think is very, very important is I will print it out. And at that point, when I've done about 2 run-throughs with it, I will read the manuscript aloud. You do this chapter by chapter. You don't want to read the whole manuscript aloud. By reading it aloud, it's going to engage your ear. Particularly when you are writing dialogue, if it's wrong, you won't necessarily know that it's wrong when you see it on the page. You read it out loud and you'll know if your dialogue works or if it doesn't. Same with characterization. Also, you may think that what you've written is really interesting and has sufficient detail. When you are going through that, combing through it the second or third time, you're going to realize it is sensory detail missing. If so, you're going to have to engage your readers in that fashion. And in addition, and here's another Patterson rule that I have taken. He will be glad for me to pass this along to any writer. Every chapter you write, and the way we write chapters, a chapter is a scene. So it'd be like a scene, in a television show or a scene in a movie. Every chapter has to do 2 things. It must advance the plot. You've got to advance the storyline. No sitting around, thinking thoughts and describing countryside. You got to advance the plot and you must enrich the character. It has to do both in order to keep your book moving. And if your book's not moving, they're not gonna read it through to the end. Also, he always says, we're gonna leave out all the boring parts that people skip. That's just us. But I think that that for me, one of the most important steps when I am preparing the manuscript is that part where I read it out loud to myself. I catch so many things, and I'm not typing typos. I got an English degree. I know how to punctuate, and I know how to spell. What I'm talking about is, how does it sound? How is it moving? How are your characters engaging? You'll have a lot better idea of that when you read it out loud.
All righty. So we have another one coming from the audience. When your new books come out and make the bestsellers list again, would you consider doing an author signing at the Missouri State Bookstore?
I would be delighted. I would be delighted. Hey, they never asked me before. Friends in the audience, I would have done it before now. I was never invited. I am honored. I am honored. I'm in.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we will make sure to do that. So another question that was pre-submitted, with all the rejection, how did you know you had unique and great stories written and not poorly written books?
I didn't know. How would I know? I am self-taught. I do not have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. I didn't go to the Iowa Writers School. I will tell you, I believed in my story. I really liked my character, but I believed in the story I was telling. I thought that even though it was fiction, I thought it was important. And the other thing, and I tried to make this very clear in my presentation, I am somewhat insane. So that when people would say, not interested, I would think, what do you know? And I would continue on. But that's just because that's a little bit.
All right, so this one last question. Many, if not most, authors aren't very good speakers. So how do you manage to be great at both?
Well, that is such a compliment. Thank you to my friend who submitted that particular question. I love it. You know, as a profession, you will find that almost without exception, writers are introverts. They're introverts, and it's such a solitary undertaking. I mean, the process of writing a book, you're sitting alone in a room with your hands on the keyboard or a pen in hand like I do, and it's just the loneliest kind of work you can do, except for the fact that when it's working, I can see it in my head, I can hear it in my ears, but other than that, you're all alone. Now, I have had a great deal of experience at public speaking because I was a trial lawyer, and then I did classroom instruction, in-class instruction for 15 years. So I've had a great deal of experience with public speaking. But here's my dirty little secret. I am actually a person who comes off as being very extroverted, but actually I am truly very introverted. And whenever I speak, I suffer terrible performance anxiety. So it's really been something to have to overcome. Part of the way I've overcome it is just by doing it again and again and again. But now that we are in these circumstances where I don't leave my house except to go to the grocery store, it's a little bit of an obstacle. And trying to seem like you're comfortable with it when you're not is, I think, as much a job of putting on a show and putting on a performance as anything else, because I pump so much adrenaline every time I'm in a public speaking situation because I am scared to death. And one of the reasons why I always have to have a packet of Kleenex with me at all times, sometimes I'll get the head sweats and people will think they ought to call 911 because I'm having a heart attack. But no, I've just got so much adrenaline pumping because I'm so nervous that it gives me the sweats. So thank you so much for saying I'm good at it because I am faking it 100%.
No, that's wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon and for Nancy being so gracious with her time. We hope that you enjoyed what you heard today and were inspired by Nancy's story. If you have suggestions on topics or alumni speakers, please include them on the survey that you will be receiving later today. And our next Bear Talks webinar will be Thursday, December 3rd from noon to 1 Central Time. We'll be partnering with the MSU Career Center again. And next month, our topic is business and dining etiquette. So we hope you will join us for that. So thank you all again and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.